Hello, friends. I'm Wendy Jo, and this is the Grow Podcast. Hey, Ashley, how are you doing this week?
I am doing amazing. I actually just came back from a conference this week, and so I'm still on a high from that. And then I had another event coming this Saturday. So it's been really busy for me, but I feel really good right now.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's been pretty busy on my end, too. I started Edge coaching and consulting. Going to be doing a variety of services from inner child work, card readings, all kinds of stuff, spiritual coaching. If you want to start a podcast, I
Right?
can help you with that.
I love that.
So this episode, I interviewed TC Jester, and we talked about laughter kind of as a healing and spiritual tool. And I know you have thoughts about this. So what are your thoughts?
So first of all, laughter is so therapeutic. It is bananas. I feel like we don't, in Western culture, we don't spend enough time giving permission to laugh. And I actually come from a family where laughter was actually kind of a coping mechanism for a lot of us in my family. And so I actually feel like I tried to shut that off because when I went into like the working world, it felt weird. Like it was like, well, why are you laughing? And I'm like, oh, because why not? Like, why wouldn't you want to laugh? So I began to shut it off. And so more recently, I wanted to be more comfortable with public speaking. So I decided to get into improv. So in previous episodes, I might have mentioned it, but really the thing that keeps me in improv, because I feel comfortable speaking now, but what keeps me comfortable, keeps me going is the fact that I get to laugh unapologetically and like hysterically in certain cases. And I feel like it's so like refreshing. One of the things that I said recently on my social media, it was like you don't have to only cry to release. You know, at the end of the day, releasing emotion is releasing emotion. And if it shows up as laughter, it feels way better than crying. So I'd rather use that more often.
Right. I completely agree. I mean, I don't know the science behind what happens in the body when you laugh. I don't know if you do, but it definitely, you just feel sometimes exhausted after a really good laugh. But most times, like you just kind of let go and allowed yourself to enjoy the moment. And only good can come from that, I think.
For sure. And you know, because we release like even fluid when we laugh. Like we're laughing, we open our mouth when we talk, we release fluid. Sometimes we even start to shed tears when we're laughing hysterically. I mean, using your diaphragms to get out a big laugh, like how can you go wrong?
Right. It's all great for just feeling good generally. So you kind of, the improv thing, you have mentioned it here and there, but I think it's really a big deal to start something new as an adult, as scary as getting up in front of people, hoping that they're going to find what you're saying funny. Right? Is there a lot of fear around it?
Like when I first started doing it, yeah. But the way that the curriculum is designed, like the first session that I did, it was literally, how do you play a game? Like, let's imagine a red ball and pass the red ball around. Like that was literally the stuff that we did amongst people that you didn't know. So by the end, you know, the 7 weeks or 8 weeks of the training, you got to know everybody really well. We got to go on stage. My first on stage bit was us sitting in a taxi cab and pretending to be different characters and picking them up on the side of the road.
Oh, how fun.
It was so much fun. And then another one that stands out to me is we pretended to be experts. And so I forget what was thrown at us as far as a topic, but we ended up being pinky toe experts. And so it's like you can't even take it too serious because you're talking about being experts in pinky toes.
Right.
Can't go wrong. So it just is a fun way to begin to use your voice to be able to, you know, just say what you think, because a lot of us, we're bringing in our experiences into the show, like things that are real sometimes can be hurtful, but if you can make comedy out of it, if you can make it enjoyable and funny, like usually those are the ones that hit the best. And so, being able to bring all of that forward in a way that, is just so enjoyable. I feel like I have community amongst the people in the theater. So it's just, I recommend it for anybody to try, to be honest with it. Improv, I don't know if improv is like a trademark or whatever, but I'm an advocate. I'll tell anybody to do it.
It sounds like it's been really healing for you.
It has for sure.
Yeah. Do you think of it as spiritual healing, physical, emotional, all of it? What do you think of it?
Emotional for sure, and spiritual. So one of the things that I believe around spirituality is being able to leverage your creative mind. And because that's the way spirit talks to us, through our creative lens. And so however that shows up for you, it should never be blocked. And so one of the issues that I deal with within my community, working with new entrepreneurs, is being able to stretch that creative mind to be able to build a vision around the business that they're trying to create. And so the biggest issue is that their creative mind won't go but so far.
That is really provocative. All that you just said, hadn't thought about it. I think so. Laughter as an access to the creative mind, bringing you to spiritual growth and perhaps business growth at the same time. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, coming up next, my interview with TC Jester.
What does laughing have to do with spirituality? Laughter is a high vibrational form of release. Some people feel like the only way to release is through tears and sadness. But ever since I started doing improv, I realized how much that is incorrect. Being intentional about releasing some of the stress that lives dormant within me has been a game changer. I just have an overall better sense of finding joy in my day-to-day life. And you know what I realized? Is that laughter is infectious. So once I start laughing, other people can't help but laugh too. So if you're feeling stressed, why not try to find a reason to laugh? It doesn't have to be improv, but tell yourself a joke, or watch a funny show, or pay attention to your kid doing something silly.
Joining me now is TC Jester. She is the creator of BS-free life counseling, coaching, and consulting. Cate is certified in positive psychology, master shamanic reiki, laughter wellness, and is completing a master's degree at NYU. Welcome to the Grow Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you. I'm so delighted that you're here. Our mutual friend, Larissa Bolivar, who I've interviewed before, recommended that we chat, and I think it was a great recommendation. So let's talk a little bit about laughter to start off with, because I think we kind of had a plan, but then right before we started recording, we created a new plan. So, and I love that, because part of what we do on the Grow podcast is kind of be authentic and be in the moment. So what are your thoughts on laughter and spirituality?
I think it's an essential part of it. And one of the things that is so interesting is a lot of people are scared of it. And I think it's always been part of my path. It's part of my culture. I'm Jewish. Even though I wasn't necessarily raised religiously, culturally, it was part of it. So I actually started writing comedy out of school. So before I even had my spiritual awakening, I was coming from this humor background. And even after it, I was full of skepticism, and I was kind of sitting in some of these ceremonies and thinking, what's happening? I would laugh during ayahuasca. Everyone else was crying and barfing. And I mean, I'd still be barfing, but I would be laughing while I was barfing because I could see the absurdity of it.
Well, that's a really good point. When you talk about the absurdity of life, and I know that you're working on a new book about that as well. It is really absurd. And I am like you, that I am laughing a lot. I worked in healthcare most of my adult life, and actually got in trouble sometimes working in facilities. They'd come in, the director of nurses comes stomping in. People are sick here. Why are you laughing in this therapy department? and which is absurd, right?
Yeah, well, especially because you just said therapy department, and laughter is actually very therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not only do the studies show it, but we can feel it. It's like our entire body vibrates, all of our chakras, all of our energy. It's one of the fastest ways to actually rebalance. So if you dip really low, it like brings you back. It's almost like an instant way to ground you into the reality.
Wow, I never thought of it that way, but I think I naturally do that personally. And one thing that I notice is when people are around me, they start doing it also because it's contagious in a way.
Yes. The most beautiful contagion, right?
Right.
Like we actually have, and it's interesting because even in like clinical psychology, they talk about emotional contagion. And I'm having like studied spirituality, and now I'm training as a mental health counselor and going through a master's program. I'm kind of looking for if they actually acknowledge a lot of what we talk about in the spiritual community, and they do, they just have different terms. So they talk about the emotional contagion in a group, which is what we would say is emotional energy.
I really love that terminology. I don't think I've heard it before, but I have experienced it, and I know that a lot of times for myself, because I have a really high vibration, that people, that is contagious also.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I don't know if that's considered emotional contagion or if it's vibrational contagion. I don't know. What would you call it?
I don't know if the clinical psychologists are ready to talk about that or not, but yeah, it's. I think it's intertwined, right? Like I think in a sense the emotional energy is the spiritual energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're talking about the frequency of love, and I actually think that laughter is the sound of love. It's the sound of delight. It's the sound of loving life. And I feel like that's a lot of the work that I'm being called to, is just helping people take delight in this reality, right? Like even if they're working with psychedelics, working with plants, working with practices and having glimpses of other dimensions and realities, we're here for a reason. So the idea is to be embodied here now and enjoying it.
Right. Right. So I have said this for a long time, you know, whatever you call your higher power, I like to use the word God. Not everybody likes that word. But, you know, I feel like God wants us to be happy. Like we're supposed to be happy, you know, and I think we forget that through the day-to-day life that can be so difficult. You know? So how can people kind of find their light in the midst of a difficult life, which we're all experiencing a lot of changes since the pandemic? I feel like life is becoming more and more complicated and different. How do we find that life force of the sound of levity and happiness?
I think the first thing is to kind of examine and be aware of the fear of it, right? That to laugh, to enjoy life does not mean that we're denying that there's suffering, right? We can embrace the fact that there's suffering. We can have great empathy and compassion for others and for ourselves, and still appreciate that there's something profoundly and deeply absurd about our reality. Right? Like I originally, when I started writing my book, I was really thinking of this idea of our reality as a learning experience, as a metaphor. I'm actually starting to think we are in a simulation, and it is a learning simulation. If you look at everything about our reality is about learning. Our memories, we're all of life, evolution, it's all about learning. What we get through our ancestors, everything has this thread,
right,
of learning, of teaching, of exploring, right? And that in a way we can think of it as we're agents of this collective intelligence, which we can call God, we can call the divine, the one, the goddess, whatever. It is the collected wisdom of all this information that each one of us gathers. So our life is always important. because not only are we having this profound experience and this gift of being here now, but also we're collecting information that's helping everyone else on this planet and all of our ancestors.
Right. I agree.
And so when you start thinking about that, how can you not laugh? Because it's so ridiculous and beautiful.
It is. It's absolutely beautiful. So you brought up something earlier about Jewish laughter and wisdom. And I have to say, you know, I grew up in a Jewish family. I do think that it's a culture and a religion. I'm not very religious, but I identify strongly with the culture. But it's interesting because so around me were lots of women who were laughing a lot, right? But I remember interviewing Dr. Uma years ago, and she was talking about when Raphael Mechoulam, you know, found THC and the endocannabinoid system, and he started naming the first cannabinoids, and he couldn't find a word in Hebrew for joy. And I thought, really? And then I started thinking back, you know, to my family, my ancestors, and how serious they were also. So I don't know, there's some sort of weird, I don't know how to describe it exactly. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, it's interesting because I think it depends on sort of the perspective one takes, right? So if we look at it at the very kind of my ancestors come from Eastern Europe. They were dealing with, they were living in the pale, right? I don't think most folks know that the expression beyond the pale is actually kind of anti-Semitic. Like it's the ideas that they were only allowed to live in this area and they couldn't extend beyond. It was very rough dealing with Russia, which is why there's a whole lot. We won't go there. That's a whole other conversation.
Right, that's a whole, yeah.
But the pogroms and whatever. So I see pictures of my ancestors looking quite serious. But then there were also the other side of the family where they were known as being quite jolly. And I think there is something about when you come from a tribe that has been demonized, discriminated against, you know, persecuted, scapegoated for so long. You either take like, you know, you either say, oh my God, and you give up, or you say, this is just fundamentally absurd and all we can, you know, it's like the tension of existentialism, right? Like you can either say the reality is absurd and I give up and I'm going to be, you know, a misanthrope, or you say, it's delightfully absurd. It almost like frees you up. But the other point I wanted to make was, you know, when I was thinking about, wow, is everything in the Torah serious? And I realized, from my mind, one of the most powerful characters in the Bible is Sarah, right? And she's the one who dares to laugh at the divine,
right? And
not only is she not punished for it, she's rewarded with it. And Isaac's name is one who laughs. So it's interesting that you were told there is no word for joy, when in a sense, Isaac.
One who laughs. It's a little different that, right. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, every holiday in Judaism is, you know, it was terrible, they almost killed us all, let's eat, right?
We made it, yes.
We have to put it aside and experience the joy of the moment after we review what happened and what could have happened, right? So maybe there is we're taught at a young age to remember it in some way, but then move forward and have a good time.
And I think it's also a profound aspect of resilience, right? It allows you to put things in perspective. I don't think it's a coincidence that we call humor a sense. It's a way to perceive the world. It's a filter, right? And you start actually perceiving the absurdity, which again doesn't mean that it's without meaning, but that you are completely free to create the meaning.
Right. I like that too. I think it is a sense. Not everyone has just like all of our other senses, it's not always sharp in every person, but I do think different cultures embrace it in more fully or less. And I think that's kind of where you were going with the Judaism portion of that.
I can't say I've been fully explored other religions, but I don't think there are a whole lot where you're going to see the religious leader making jokes. And at least at the Reform temples, the rabbis are often making jokes.
They are. And
in between the prayers.
Right. There's the sort of the business of the traditions in a way. Like we go through the same prayers, when you think about the Torah, on Simcha's Torah, we're reading the last line and the first line. So it's very regimented in a way. But you're absolutely right. At the same time, they're always injecting some pop culture, some things to laugh about. And I think it sort of brings them a little closer to the congregation in a way.
Mm-hmm. I think there's also, you brought up, and I know that that's very much your area, and that's how we connected through Larissa, was cannabis. Mm-hmm. And there's also this tradition of Jewish shamanism connected with cannabis. And
I did not know that.
If you look at
tell us about that.
It's kind of, look, I can't say this absolutely, but it's not exactly a secret that the figure of Moses is able to communicate with the divine only when he's alone and there is a burning bush, a burning plant. Uh-huh. There is a recipe in there for creating the anointing oil that with, I may mangle this pronunciation, but kane basem, right? Like,
right.
There was a long tradition in that part of the world of working with cannabis. And recently they found an altar in Israel with resin, with cannabis resin.
Really?
And there's an interesting affinity. In fact, I think it was Nixon who said, I don't know what it is about the Jews and why they like, marijuana so much. And a lot of the research
did not know any of that.
And the research on cannabis is primarily being done, at least the forefront is in Israel. There's some kind of affinity there. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's some, I keep getting this message coming through about connecting the streams, like the streams of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And there's something about that. And also understanding that these plants, including cannabis, were always traditionally had three uses, right? So there is the recreational connecting with others, the social aspect, mm-hmm. There is the medicinal aspect, and then there is the sacred spiritual aspect. And the conditions in which you use them, the formulations, the dose, everything is different depending on those contexts. And I think that's gotten a little bit lost now, that people forget that they're actually, those are three different uses. They tend to get kind of intertwined.
That's true. I hadn't thought about it in that way. That's it kind of lays out sort of the truth about the plant, and the applications in a way that I think people can really understand. And when you blur the lines, perhaps you don't get the full benefit that you could get if the formulation was for whatever process you were in at that time, whether it's leisure, medicine, or spirituality. So that I think that's good for people to understand for sure. I think that Israel has been ahead all along in terms of research. And, that said, I didn't really think about that connection with Judaism, but it really is food for thought.
Yeah, another one which it is that, and I full disclaimer, I am not a Kabbalah scholar, but I've read a little bit, is that there is an argument to be made that the energy of the plant, that smoke, is that energy of Shekinah, that divine feminine energy that kind of unites it all. Mm-hmm. There's something very powerful about this plant that has spread herself all over the planet, right?
Right.
And she's waiting for us to all understand how to use her properly.
Right. Well, and I thought the connection with Israel and with Jews in general, we are taught from the time we're born, really. Like I had to say a prayer with my kids when they were born that where I am committing to educate this child, right? Education, education, education. It's part of the culture and misunderstood, because it isn't the connection to money per se. It's truly educate yourself, make sure your children are educated. So I thought, they grabbed on to this amazing plant to study it because of that background of, education is so important. Yeah.
Education and also like questioning and
Yes.
profound humility. So everything I just said about the ideas, I'm not claiming those are absolute truth. Is the most important thing on the path is never to get so full of one's ego as to say this is the truth. Right. It's just an idea. It's something that seems to resonate at this point in my path. But I love to learn, and I think that's one of the greatest things in the culture is that this love of learning, and that it is, it's not just the education, but the questioning, the critical thinking.
Yes, be curious.
Debating, yes. Right? Like the rabbinical schools, I think they debate a lot.
We used to say, you can't get, 10 Reformed Jewish people to agree on anything, really, because
including what to have for dinner.
Right? Curiosity, education, and having an opinion is very important. Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I hope that you'll consider coming back to the Grow podcast. You have so much to share.
I would love to. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation.
And how can people get in touch with you?
Well, you can check out the website. It's bsfreelife.com. I'm also on Facebook as TC Jester. I'm on Instagram as a Foole, AFFOOLE.
Wonderful. As I said, it's been just delightful. Thank you. And everyone take a look at her website for sure. There's so much that she has to offer. Thanks again for chatting with me.
Thank you.
Hey there, Wendy Jo, co-host of the Grow podcast. Also, Wendy Edge, occupational therapist. And I wanted to tell you about my new business where I'm combining the principles of occupational therapy, coaching, and spirituality, and wellness, of course. On the website, you'll see that I'm doing Osho Zen card readings, spiritual coaching, spirit paintings, and so much more. So if you want, check it out, edgecoachingandconsulting.com.
Have you heard of the Cannabis Nursing School? It's a place where cannabis nursing, entrepreneurship, and spirituality meet. The High Align Tribe is waiting for you, and it's so easy to find. CannabisNursingSchool.com.
All right, so we've gotten to the end of the interview, and I think it was so exciting. So I wonder, what was the big takeaway for you?
Well, I think really thinking deeply about laughter as a healing tool. I kind of always thought that it was, and I think revisiting a little bit of Judaism with her and Jewish thought and laughter, which is so important to our culture, kind of crossed the bridge for me a little bit, like, oh yes, this is a healing tool and it is spiritual. Definitely, I think it's worthwhile to check out her work in so many different areas and learn more about laughter, spirituality, and all the things that she has to offer.
Yeah, for sure. That is amazing.
All right. Well, we will see you next time. Bye. Keep laughing.
Yes.